All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining NJJN's Activate the Vote live session tonight. My name is Jordan Biggs. I'm a current sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill, and I serve on NJJN's Membership Advisory Council. So tonight's session will be all about how the upcoming election will impact youth justice work in general, and we're getting to hear from two experts about how they feel electoral politics generally in this election specifically will impact their work. So tonight we'll be joined by Aneesha Tucker, intern at Emancipate NC in Durham, North Carolina, and Ronaldo Villeda, a youth activist and policy organizer, or working with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition out of California. So without further ado, let me make sure Aneesha can hop on with us.
Cool.
Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
Cool. Should I start introducing myself?
Yeah, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aneesha Tucker. I use she, they pronouns, just so y'all know. And I'm a student at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm a third year. I was just accepted into the public health school, and I'm studying health policy and management. Thank you. And women and gender studies. And around May or July, I started interning with Emancipate NC as a complement to the work that I do with CJA on campus, which is criminal justice awareness and advocacy. And so Emancipate NC's purpose and vision is and mass incarceration around through education, community education, and narrative shift. And so within that, there's a focus of like ending youth confinement, and where Emancipate NC is committed to abolishing youth confinement, establishing alternatives that respect the dignity of children. And so my work with Emancipate NC stems around that. And so I have been writing articles for them, including Counselors Not Cops, and like doing letters or writing articles about how to get SROs out of schools, and like visions around that. And also doing work with the Justice League, which is a partnership between NJJN and Annie E. Casey Foundation, I believe, with the aim of like mobilizing and training youth and other directly impacted individuals to take action to emancipate children from detention. And so fellows learn to advocate and organize and use that like intimate knowledge from being directly impacted to liberate people. But yeah.
Super cool work. So I guess we should get into this election.
Yeah.
So the first question I have for you is just how do you see the election impacting youth justice work?
Yeah. This election. I feel like from the people around me and the people I like surround myself with who are also doing this work, this election is bringing up a lot of emotion, and a lot of that emotion being a lot of negative emotion, like a lot of disappointment, a lot of like, what do I do? And like no one I know, especially like our age, is excited to like go vote for a politician that will like continue to enact violence and imperialism on Black and brown people across the globe. But the fact is that youth justice work will continue past the election. And so it will continue regardless, as it always has. And youth justice work does not put at least the work that I'm in, does not put all of their faith into voting, and certainly not into one person like a politician. Mm-hmm. And so electoral politics are not going to save us, and like we know that for sure. But voting is a method for harm reduction, but it doesn't change the fact that the system is created to harm. So youth justice work is going to attack that system. And I read an article, and from someone who I'm forgetting their name, but they said they like have full faith in the like capability of the system to like replicate and uphold violence here globally, which is like what it has been like sworn to do since its creation. So I think that youth justice work will continue to like pick up on like the seeds being planted of like abolition and build off of that foundation to like create a fundamental change.
Definitely, definitely. And I liked how you framed it as harm reduction because I do think there's just a lot of people our age jaded with electoral politics post 2016 and well post just us recognizing politics as we got older. But I
Right.
do think in that same vein of recognizing harm reduction and recognizing who's being harmed,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of guides me to my next question in that how do you think youth justice organizers, activists can make space for young people who aren't 18, who aren't old enough to vote, but are still being harmed by policies enacted by elected officials?
Yeah, I think that like making space looks like allowing them to be a part of the process of like holding these elected officials accountable, right? Because they're accountable to us. And so, and young people, even though they don't have the time or don't have the chance to vote, they do have the energy, time, and passion to like create communities and organize themselves and mobilize themselves to actively engage with their elected officials at every level. And like they have the power to re envision what they want their lives to look like and what they want the systems to look like because they will inevitably fail and the youth are going to be the ones to rebuild it. And so they can use their voice and they can organize and they can create change on the ground right now.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. Next question I have for you is just are there any recent events in the youth justice field that you've been following?
So this morning there was actually a action on Chapel Hill's campus with no coal to lower coal emissions, and so there was that. There's a community march on Saturday with NC Born in Raleigh, so there's that. And I also think that there's a Chapel Hill Policing Accountability Board that's having like an open town hall that people can attend on Saturday morning.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Next question I have for you is just in thinking about how allyship, the conversation around allyship has sort of been thrust to the forefront because of everything that's happened over the summer and acknowledging how in a lot of instances, youth aren't in the spaces where decisions are being made that directly impact them. How do you think youth justice work can better censor young people?
Yeah. So, for instance, in the Justice League, it's utilizing youth and they're centering youth and they're asking youth to be a part of this process and using their voice. And so I think that with youth justice work, not afraid to ask like people who are in high school, people who are in middle school, what are they thinking? Like, what do they want? And utilizing that like community knowledge to create change is super important. And so, kind of not just centering what we think youth need and asking them directly is like the whole idea of like what allyship is.
Definitely, thank you for that. Because I think a lot of times we sort of put allyship in this box and that it only exists in like a racial context, but applying it to different aspects of marginalization, be it sexual orientation, gender, or ageism, is just necessary in making sure we acknowledge intersectionality in work. Right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Courtney just said, "Ask youth what they need." Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, Aneesha, that was all the questions I had scheduled for you, but feel
Great.
free to state anything that may be on your mind or any questions you have for me, to be honest.
So I guess what are you feeling in terms of how you want to like frame youth justice to center like youth and like people who are most marginalized?
Yeah, I think in a lot of instances, we have these groups, especially those groups that are being made recently, where people see an issue, and a lot of times it's people who claim to be allies hopping on the issue in order to perform their allyship, right? And I think a large issue in that is just if you don't include marginalized people from the jump, it gets harder to include them once you're already off the ground running. So I think in a lot of instances, it's just about making sure we're including these marginalized groups from the inception and not trying to throw them in on the back end, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we're here to talk about the election, so I feel like it would, it would be on bar to talk about what you feel and how you think it'll impact youth justice work.
Um, well, I know my personal feelings about electoral politics are pretty similar, if not the exact same as yours. Just realizing that uh, people have existed before politics, and justice will always need to supersede politics. So, that being said, communities will always do what's necessary to protect themselves, and that youth justice work will, of course, in the context of this election, um, there will need to be some harm reduction done. And I do think there needs to be a shift of focus towards more local elections that might impact youth to on a different scale than a national election, and just acknowledging that youth justice work doesn't begin or end at a ballot box.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely it. I think that there's a question that either you or I were asked.
I'll shoot it to you. Hey, Ayana. Ayana asks, "How would you navigate someone who wants justice but does not want to vote in this year's election?"
So I was actually just reading an article about this. I read a lot of articles about like what people feel about electoral politics, especially in regards to abolition. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there are a lot of reasons why people do not vote, of course, and justice is not tied to voting because of like what Jordan and I were saying about how like the struggle for justice is not like voting is a tool and a method and like a way that people can like reduce harm, but it's not going to fall in that one person that's elected, and nor are we putting all of our eggs in that basket. And so for someone who wants justice, it looks like grassroots community organizing, and it looks like building community with each other, building solidarity together, and like imagining what our communities can look like. And like something that is super helpful is that like some people are like, I'm an abolitionist, but it's like you're a student to abolition. And being a student to abolition means that you're constantly thinking about how can this be different? And what does justice look like? What does our community look like? Like, what does our community look like without police? And etc. And so those are the types of things that we can do to envision justice and manifest justice and make it happen.
Definitely. One of my favorite quotes is just, I'm not sure who said it, but they said, community organizing work or just activism work in general requires you being a science fiction author. You're imagining worlds that don't exist yet.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's the perfect way to enter the work and the perfect way to frame what you do within the work.
Right. And like the beauty of it is that it can exist. Like all of these things don't exist in like a vacuum, and they're not inevitable. Like all of it will inevitably fail, but but what we build on top of it can happen, and we can build solidarity to make it happen. Um,
And we have a question from Courtney asking, is there a youth justice issue that you think more people should be discussing during the campaign?
hmm. I think that there are so many issues that they can be talking about right now, and I feel like they're not talking about really any of them on the campaign level. But something that I've been feeling super passionate about lately, I don't know if this will answer your question on what I think is the most important issue, but something I've been thinking about is like a lot of environmental justice issues that can definitely, like the Trump administration, when in 2016, like basically deregulated a bunch of things in regards to environmental justice. And so I think that's something that needs to be talked about more, because it has serious implications for our climate and also for our Black and Brown communities who are directly impacted by these things. So I think that's something that should be talked about more, especially because youth are directly impacted by this situation, and so are incarcerated people, because they are the most marginalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Patrice asked, which I guess will be our last question for today. What's on each of our reading lists or top things to check out when informing our understanding of abolition and electoral politics?
Do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I can go first.
Cool.
I think what I've really been into recently has just been a lot of Angela Davis, primarily Are Prisons Obsolete? I know that's been a book that a lot of people have been referring to over the summer as sort of an intro to abolition. And there's also a really good New York Times article that's profiling Ruth Wilson Gilmore. And she's a doctor of geography at a school in California that I can't think of right now. But a lot of her work is around location and how location allocation to things like prisons or different things that impact the environment always disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities, poor Black and Brown communities, and just how we can revision justice and start to think that things like prisons, things like police weren't always things that existed, and how we can center the community in all of our seeking of justice. So that's what's been on my mind.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. I need to like look at my book list. This is a question. So in terms of so what you were saying about science fiction being the like way that we can reimagine the world, Octavia Butler is super great, and and so any of those books would be on my list for getting in the mindset of reimagining our worlds.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Aneesha.
Yeah,
this has been super fun.
Thanks for having me. All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, so joining us next, we'll have Ronaldo Villeda, again, out of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition in California. Interrogating youth without counsel and parents present happens way too often. Definitely, I agree. And I was actually just able to, in my class, we were able to join a public defender's training where they talked about how speech pathology is often an underlooked way in which language gets weaponized in youth interrogations. So that was super cool to learn about. Hey, Ronaldo, how are you?
Hello, Jordan. Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. How's it going?
Going pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just enjoying the sunlight out here.
Well, the sun's starting to go down over here, so I'm very jealous. So if you could you introduce yourself really quickly and describe the Anti-Recidivism Coalition?
Of course. My name is Ronaldo Villeda. I am a youth advocate and community organizer for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And ARC is an organization that works with formerly incarcerated individuals and those who are currently inside. We provide reentry services for those who are coming home, and we also provide job readiness, we provide therapy, we provide educational help if they need help with school, vocational training, housing. I mean, we really try to encompass all the needs that people need when they come home. And my role there is to work at the local level and try to help change policies to reform the juvenile justice system here in LA County.
Super cool. Thanks for joining us. So the first question I have for you is, how do you see the election impacting youth justice work?
To be honest, I do feel that the elections locally can really play a role in youth justice work that's currently going on. We need to, people just need to be informed about who's running for office locally, whether it be city or their mayor, because a lot of times people can undo policies and can reverse things that we have already passed. So it's important for people to be informed in that sense. But youth justice work is work that you have to be in for the long run. So you have to really be patient and willing to battle the obstacles that are currently in place.
Definitely. So the next question I have for you is, how do you think we can make space for youth who aren't old enough to vote but are still impacted by the decisions of elected officials in youth justice work?
Youth who are not old enough to vote can still play a very focal role in youth justice, because with the youth voice being a part of the process, it can make their day-to-day lives and like the real life situations they encounter out in our community, it gives them a platform and it amplifies the problems and can also bring real solutions to the things that they face. Although they're not old enough to vote, if we can organize, if we can get youth to be informed and empower them, they can really sway elected officials to think differently by changing their hearts and minds.
So I definitely agree. I think just making sure young people know that their voice is powerful and is heard, even if not by elected officials at first, by people like you working with these groups that center their work, is super important. And sort of on that same tip of making sure marginalized people are included in electoral politics and are included in the work that we're doing, I know California, there's recently been some debate about Prop 17. So could you describe what that is and how you feel California should be approaching it?
So Prop 17 is a prop that's going to be on the ballot. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to restore voting rights for those who are on parole. So that's roughly about 50,000 Californians that would be able to vote. And it's really important to me to be able to uplift their voices, because a lot of people who have come home and are on parole, they pay taxes, they're law-abiding citizens, but they don't have the voice or the ability to have a say-so in their very own communities. And it really is disheartening to think about that, but it's good to finally know that we are at the point where we can change that forever, and we can make sure that people are no longer disenfranchised here in California.
Definitely. And speaking on just California and y'all's upcoming election, is there a youth justice issue that you think more people should be discussing during the campaign?
I think a big thing that I see missing around just youth justice is amplifying decarcerating youth, and um, especially right now in LA County. We're part of a work group called the Youth Justice Work Group, and essentially the work group has been tasked with taking youth out of probation and creating a new department that's grounded in youth development and diversion. And I think that is something that it's long overdue. It's been needed to be done, but it hasn't been. And now we have the opportunity to really reimagine and reinvent what rehabilitation looks like for our youth. And I think that's very powerful because we can set the standard for what is to come for California and the rest of the nation.
Definitely. You all's work in LA County has definitely been influential to different youth organizing folks across the country. So that's super exciting to hear about. Are there any recent events in the youth justice field that you've been following?
I mean, I've been heavily involved in the youth justice work group, so I've been solely focused on that process. I also, what's another one that, I think a really important one here in California as well is the closure of youth prisons. Governor Newsom signed a bill, I think a couple months ago, where he basically set a plan to shut down youth prisons by, I believe, 2023. And that has also now brought more work onto this work group because we need to think of alternatives to incarceration now for this set of population. And basically, those are the youth who commit violent crimes. And it's essential that we start to give them meaningful rehabilitation. And that's also been something that I've been keeping up with because it's important for us to, as a society, to really embrace youth and give them the tools they need to really achieve success and be who they truly are.
Definitely. Thank you for that. We have an audience question. Shout out to Courtney. She's been really on point with her questions all night.
Thanks, Courtney.
So she asks, do you have any advice for youth activists on how to create the kind of momentum that y'all have been able to gain in LA County?
I think the one piece of advice I would give anybody doing this work is to be completely transparent, to be genuine, and really focus on the human connection, because that has been really a driving factor for us to gain this momentum. We've been able to vocalize formerly incarcerated youth, system impacted youth, and we've given them a platform, and it's really been effective in changing the stigma around the way we think about youth and changing the stigma of, you know, having to incarcerate to hold accountable and having to incarcerate in order to have public safety. And it really is about making it personal and making sure that the people who are in power really understand the struggles that youth face, because they have never been in those shoes and they will never understand that. But when you vocalize youth who are directly impacted, it really just, it tears down the room. Like, there is no words that can describe it.
Definitely. I mean, I don't think I could have said it any better. Just centering people who have been through what you're attempting to fix, right?
Yeah.
So the last question I have written down for you is just, since we've been speaking about how LA County specifically has done a lot of really cool and really important work, what do you think is the best way for organizers and activists to share info with each other so we can begin to learn from mistakes and just replicate, like Courtney was saying?
Um, I mean, it's a little difficult now in the world of COVID, but it's also a lot easier to share information because we're all on our laptops. But I really do think in order for the organizing to work is for everybody to be on a unified front. You know, there has to be strategic. We have to organize. We have to all agree on what the goals are and what the outcomes should be. And once we can get that in line and have our foundation, then we can just strategically start to chip away at ways to really put pressure on the people who are in power. Because if we are all coming in and we are all agreeing on the same points, I do feel that that resonates more. And it is a little daunting to elected officials when they see a handful of organizations who are reputable in this work vocalizing these concerns. And in order to not recreate, because the wheel's already invented, we don't have to recreate the wheel. In order not to be redundant, it's important to really, and this is my belief, really think innovatively. Like, don't let the current social construct tie you down or limit the way you think. Because if you come in with truly innovative ideas and you truly believe in them, then that's what's going to start to become the norm. And that's, to me, the most effective way that you can do it.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Well, if there are no more questions, Ronaldo, I want to thank you for your time joining us. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your words. We really appreciate it having you on the live tonight.
Thanks, Jordan. And I like that that poster you have back there.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Jordan. You have a good one.
All right, Ronaldo. All right, everyone. Big shout out to Aneesha and Ronaldo for joining us tonight. And thank you all for joining us. The video of this live will be available to view on our feed after we end it. And please be sure to check out Aneesha, Ronaldo, and the Emancipate NC and the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. They should all be tagged on the post for this event. Also, be sure to follow NJJN if you weren't already. Again, my name is Jordan Biggs, and thank you for joining us tonight.